Diplomatic cables released by the transparency website WikiLeaks have revealed that Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Turkey had a secret deal in 2012 to topple the Syrian government. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has said that the US, Britain and France were also involved in the deal. Assange has quoted the Saudi Foreign Ministry's documents, which were recently published by his group. Papers also show that key US allies in the region, mainly Saudi Arabia, had become increasingly uncooperative and aggressive by expanding their autonomy and sometimes even acting against US wishes. WikiLeaks began publishing hundreds of thousands of diplomatic and government documents belonging to Saudi Arabia on June the 19th. Saudi Arabia has implicitly confirmed the authenticity of the cables by advising its citizens against reading or redistributing the papers or face hefty fines. To discuss that further, we're now joined by Mr. Christopher Walker, who is a Middle East expert, and he's now joining us live now via Skype from London. And Mr. Walker, for many of us, this doesn't come as a surprise, of course, but do you think any of the countries spoken of even care that this is now out in the public?
Oh, yes. As you say, it's no great surprise. But on the other hand, you don't like surprises to be made public in this way, and it'll be deeply embarrassing to those countries that such a dubious sort of union, as it were, against President Assad was formed by Qatar on one side, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia playing this increasing role which it's been accused of. And interestingly, I thought was the second part of that leaked cable, all of which is regarded as authentic by diplomats, there's no question of them having been made up or anything, was this role that Saudi was playing, that at the same time upsetting the Americans by increasing its autonomous behavior in the Middle East, where of course it had been somewhat of an American puppet, giving its oil and selling it to America in exchange for towing the line with American foreign policy.
Interestingly, Mr. Walker, I'm wondering if in the future, the policy towards Syria will be changed, because, we're hearing of already Turkey saying that it may very well enter into a ground invasion now in Syria. So even though this is now out in the public domain, do you think any of the above will really change their policy?
No, I don't think they will. They'll grin and bear it that it's embarrassing diplomatically, and I think in some ways, it might encourage them to go along similar lines, particularly, as you rightly say, the rumours growing about Turkey, which is the only one in position to mount any sort of ground operation against Syria, and it indicates, the huge amount of funds that are available to the opponents of President Assad, coming from such rich countries as Saudi Arabia and Qatar.
Indeed. Mr. Walker, then going forward, obviously, then one has to wonder what happens now when it comes to these leaks, because as you mentioned about the Saudi factor, certainly there's been much debate on that. Are the Saudis really acting in tandem with the Americans, or are they genuinely working against U.S. wishes?
That's the $64,000 question. I would say they're probably breaking away more under their new regime, as it were, the new royal leaders there, against the Americans. And the Americans, for their part, as we know, are more reluctant to get involved. In Syria, they've never really followed a very coherent policy, and I would think this will only emphasize the position of the local players and possibly strengthen their hand now that it's out in the open and people can discuss it.
All right, we'll leave it there at that. But as always, Mr. Walker, we appreciate your insight. That was Christopher Walker, who is speaking to us live from London.